record on this. So, hi, good morning, everyone. Is my screen visible? You can just type in the chat. I've unmuted all of you for now, but you can just put a yes in the chat, and I think that'll be fine for now. I hope my screen is visible to everyone. Perfect. Thanks, Gaurav. So, the idea of today's session is to just get started with learning Python. Now, the approach that we've taken here is to not directly jump into Python, but relate it with something that we already are familiar with, which is in our cases Excel. So right, so we'll be bridging the gap between Excel and Python, right? So I had asked some of you to add the key expectations or some expectations that you guys had. So I've added, merged them and added them here. Around 12, 13 people of you had written it. So we want to learn Python and its applications. So we'll be doing that today. Understanding Python's role in data analysis and data cleaning. So we'll be doing exercise of text extraction, which is a sort of data, which is data cleaning, data manipulation today. Python's integration with Excel and its benefits. I'll just give you a glimpse of what Python and Excel looks like. We'll not be working on it today. I'll just show you how it looks like. Automation possibilities for daily office tasks. Sure, we'll not be doing any specific programs for automation, but if someone has any specific questions around it, they can definitely ask them. And gaining knowledge of new tools and staying updated with technology, which is what we're exactly doing right now. Perfect. So this is not a hands-on session, so you don't have to do it. I'll be sharing this presentation with you as well. We've got like 40, 50 slides. I'll be sharing them with you after the session as well. I just want to let you know that how do you work on Python. So you need to install the Anaconda Navigator. You just go to your browser, go to Anaconda Navigator, search for it, and you download the app. Once you download the app, it looks something like this. And in this, you can use the Jupyter notebook that you can see on the screen. You can use the Jupyter notebook. You launch it, and once you launch the Jupyter notebook, it looks something like this, right? It looks something like this. So you can work on Jupyter notebook. I'll be working on Jupyter notebook as well. But if you don't want to download anything, you always use Google Colab, which is on Jupyter notebook is also on the cloud, but Google Colab is also on the cloud. It's just that you don't have to download anything, right? So the exercise that we'll be looking at is extracting parts from text, which is a very fundamental activity in data cleaning and data manipulation, right? Why do we do it? Because most of the data that comes to us through organizations in our organizations is unclean. Even if it's not unclean, it comes from systems. So you have your SAP, you have your Salesforce that give you auto-generated reports in a very rigid format. Before you load that data into any business intelligence tool, your Power BI, your Tableau, you have to clean that data, right? It simplifies data processing. You have to segregate customer. You have your customer code and customer name in one column. You have product code, product name in one column. You want to do a VLOOKUP on product code. You will have to segregate those, right? And it plays a pivotal role in automating information retrieval as well. And it is once your data is clean, only then you can start with doing the analysis. So extracting parts from a text is one very important activity, and we'll be focusing on that for today, right? What are the use cases for this? You get to do your data analysis and you generate insights essentially, right? So, and this is across organizations, across sectors. Even if you're in your own organizations, if you look at the data that comes from systems, there'll be some addition. Just a second, I'll add someone. Yeah, there will be some additional blank rows at the top, right? There might be some additional columns that you don't need. So data cleaning is essentially very important, and the use cases, as you can see on the screen as well, you get to generate analysis and insights. Information retrieval becomes easy, right? And when you send a clean data to someone, it is easy for them to now look at the data rather than sending them a messy data, a messy file, right? So in e-commerce, for example, text extraction ensures that product search yields product description and reviews that aid customer in making purchase decisions. So whenever you go on an e-commerce website and you search for a product, there's some table at the back end where that product is being looked up, right? And if there was a space in front of the product name, if maybe there was a leading or a trailing space, the match wouldn't have been exact, right? Some more use cases. There's going to be a bit of theory, and we'll focus on the practical as well. You get to integrate and transform data across your industries again, and understanding natural language helps in easier understanding of natural NLP, natural language processing. Because once you have clean data, only then you can feed it to a system, and allowing maybe chatbots. If you use chatbots, if you ever get to work with chatbots, you need to have clean data to be able to load it into them, right? So what is the problem statement that we're going to solve for today? What are we going to work on today? So we have a data set, fairly simple. I've just taken a sample data set. We have to extract a part of the data set, a part of the product code, because the product code is distinct, and when it has three parts, usually each of the parts is a specific code for something within the organization. Maybe a raw material being used, maybe a vendor code, maybe a product code and a product name, maybe a department that is being tagged to it, right? So it is unique, it is identifiable, and we have to extract this, right? So our objective is fairly simple. We go to Python, we understand how we can extract individual parts from this product code, right? Which is TEC-PH-5816, right? First, I'll just give you a glimpse of how you would have done it Excel. Most of you might have already known, so there's no harm in doing a bit of revision, but I'll just show you how it would have looked like in Excel. So is everyone aware of the left, mid, and right function, right? So if you know the number of characters that you want to extract from left, mid, or right, if you know and your data is consistent, then you can always use left, mid, and right. Okay. Now, what does left, mid, and right do? It essentially extracts the number of characters that you define from a cell from the left when you use left, right from the right, and mid is when you define a starting character and the number of characters, right? Fairly simple. Left returns the beginning characters, mid returns the middle characters of the string, and right returns the ending characters of the string. But this is very important to understand that this is okay when your data is consistent, right? What if your data is not consistent, right? What if your data is not consistent? In that case, you will have to add a customizable function that is not dependent on the number of characters you specify. We'll look at that in a minute. Before that, what are the advantages of using a left, right, mid when working in Excel? You have conditional extraction. You can combine it with other functions and add dynamic length. That is what we will be looking at. So that even if I have 5 lakh rows and I don't know what is the length of each product code, maybe there are 14 characters, maybe there are 18 characters. The format is same. There's a dash in between. There are two dashes in between in the product code. But I want to be able to extract only the specified length, right? If you guys have any questions, just put them in the chat. Once I'll take a pause in between, right? And then we'll address the questions. I'll unmute you guys as well. So you have dynamic length calculation. Then you have delimiters and patterns, wherein you can combine it with find, search, mid, and substitute functions like that. Similarly, you can also use regular expressions. I'll be hinting on this a little. Regular expressions is a concept wherein you identify patterns in text and then match and get that out, extract. You identify specific patterns in a text and you extract that, right? You can implement data validation rules, fairly simple, and you can incorporate error handling as well, right? Now, how does the dynamic formula look like? So firstly, formulas should be dynamic and adaptable. If you have a data set coming in regularly, it should not be that you're writing formulas again and again. You have to figure out a way of how do you automate it. Automation is not very big thing. It's very small things. It's something that you do every day. If you can automate a repetitive task, that's also a step towards automation. So we've covered this pattern matching, error handling. I'll just jump to the formula, right? So this is how the formulas would look like in case the length of my product code is not exact. So in this case, as you can see, TEC PH5816 was the product code from earlier, and we have a product code that is larger in length. So here, what is essentially happening is, in the left function, instead of just specifying the character, you find the delimiter and you're doing a -1. You're finding the first delimiter, first instance of the delimiter, and you're doing a -1, so that when Excel searches from the left, it'll give you an output before the delimiter. Similarly, in mid, now I understand this formula is a bit complex to write, and hence here, what will happen is, I'll just reshare my screen because we'll be doing a bit of chat GPT as well. So I'll just share my browser. In fact, let me share my entire screen. I hope my screen is visible. I'll just hide this, hide controls, jump to ChatGPT, right? So all I gotta tell ChatGPT is that I need to extract different parts from a text that I have, and it'll help write the code for me. So I'll just copy this code that I have. I have the Excel as well. I'll be sharing the Excel as well with you guys. And I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll just write use Excel and extract parts. There's someone at the extract parts from text. Now, while it is writing the formula for us, writing a mid with so many finds, it is not if I were to explain it to you, it's fairly simple. It's trying to, it's all it is doing is finding the position, returns the position of the thing that you want to specify. So when I put a delimiter dash, it finds a position. It gives me a number. So in the first product code, TEC dash, so when I use a find to find the dash, it'll give me the output as 4, right? Similarly, in write as well, it is not, it is finding the first instance, then finding the second instance, and then searching for it from the right. So as you can see on the screen, I'll zoom in a bit as well. So to extract the first part, you can use a left function. It has written the code for you. All you have to do is just copy and paste. If you want to make it more easy for you, specify the cell also where data is, and it'll work on that range as well. To do a mid, now the best part is, let's say you're not able to write this formula on your own, but you still want to understand it. So all you have to do is copy the formula, paste it here, and just mention, explain this to me. And it will break down that formula in detail, and it will explain it to you bit by bit. If you want some more examples with it, all of that, you just have to use it. It's the best thing out there. You have to start using it if you've not been using it already, right? It hardly took a second for 10 seconds for ChatGPT to write the code, right? So sometimes understanding formulas is also very important. Now that we have these tools that will generate formulas for us, understanding the formulas is also important. Now let's jump back to our presentation. I'll just skip this part. So yeah, so extracting the first part, the left formulas, in simple terms, it is extracting the text before the delimiter. Mid is trying to find what is there between the two delimiters, and the last part, which is right, is trying to find what's there after the second instance of the delimiter, right? Now, again, in this case, I knew that my data had two delimiters, right? I knew that my data had two delimiters. So that information you will have to know. Now, someone might ask, okay, what if some of my product codes have three delimiters? Then they must have a meaning, because when I put a delimiter in between a product code or an item code, each part has a meaning. So if there are four parts to a product code, and that means there are three delimiters, you have to know the meaning, and you will have to know the logic why it's there, and then you can customize the formula, because this formula will not work when you have four parts, which is where you have three delimiters, right? So now we'll be starting with Python. Before we jump to Python, I just want to unmute, and if you have any questions, You can, I think I'll have to stop sharing my screen. Yeah, participants. Let me just unmute you guys. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead. So we've seen how you extract text apart from a text in Excel, right? Now we'll be doing that same thing in Python. We'll be going step by step. And I've also started learning Python recently, and this is the approach that I found very useful. Now that we have tools like ChatGPT, it's become very easier to learn stuff. No questions, perfect. I'll just put you guys on mute, and I'll jump back to the presentation. Right, Shift F5 to go full screen. And now let's look at Python. We'll not be just be looking at the presentation, we'll be doing it as well. So let me just reshare. Just a second, I'm just resharing I'll just share my entire screen. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So how do we do this in Python? If you've never written a Python code, that's perfectly fine. 2 days back, even I had not. So in Python, when you start working, so the first thing that you will have to do is you will have to put that code into the Python program. So now in this case, I'm just taking one example, right? You could upload your Excel, you could ask Python to read your Excel file and solve it and give the output to you. But understand that in Python, you don't use it to overwrite an Excel file. Python, you use it for doing analysis there and there in the Python, in the programming window, right? So I'll just explain this code to you in a minute. Just follow through with me. So in Python, this is the first line of code that I will write. Now, product code over here is not a specific syntax. It is just that I have a product code, hence I wrote product code is equal to TEC dash PH dash 5816. Why is it in a double inverted comma, double inverted quotes? Because it's a string. Strings need to be held into double inverted quotes, double quotes, right? Now, this is a simple variable assignment statement wherein I am saying that name is so for example, if I had to define my name in Python, I would write name is equal to Talha, right? So in our case, I'm just writing product code is equal to TEC dash PH dash 5816, which is our product code. Now, fairly simple product code is the variable name on the left hand side, and whatever is after the equal to, which is the assignment operator. So equal to would be my assignment operator, that is assigning something. And TC-PH, which is on the right of the equals assignment operator, is my product code, right? So in this code, you're creating a variable name, product code, and assigning the string value TC-PH-5816. And there are no arguments or functions involved in this. So this is fairly, so if I were to do print product code, it would give me TC-PH.5816. We'll go to Jupyter Notebook in a second. Let me just open that as well. Let me just open Jupyter Notebook as well. Remind me later. Launch. Yeah. Coming back to the presentation. So essentially, this is what the code looks like. So product code here is my variable name. It can be anything. Okay. You could just write code. You could just write product name, item code, whatever it is, whatever you want to define. The logic is it should be easily understandable if someone else is seeing your code. So if I'm seeing your code tomorrow and you've written something else, you just written code. I need to know what kind of a code this is. Is this an item code? Is this a vendor code? Is this a product code? Right? What is equal to doing? It's an assignment operator. It's assigning the value of a string to the variable that you've created. And TEC-PH-5816 is our product code that we have assigned. Right? Let me just open Python. And will I have to reshare my screen? Yeah. Is everyone on my browser? Can you see Jupyter? Is everyone on my browser? If you can just put a yes in chat. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. I'll just go to my Python notebook, hide floating meeting controls. Right. Let me just zoom in a bit. Yeah. So, like I said, the first part is we just define what the product code is. So, if I were to do a simple print, oh, my bad, you don't write an equal to, yeah, and I just write product code and run this code. So I'll get tec-ph-5816 as my output. Fairly simple, everyone. Is this clear to everyone? Fairly, was everyone able to understand this? We're just trying to, perfect. Okay, let's come back to Excel. So essay now, there are three steps basically to this code, right? And I have not written this code. Let me be very frank with you. I went to ChatGPT and I used ChatGPT to write this code, but I had to spend a lot of time understanding it, and that is what we'll be focusing on today as well, right? ChatGPT will be able to give you code, whatever complexity, it'll be able to write it for you, but there's always a margin of error. This was something fairly simple, right? But compared to an Excel wherein you have to write huge formulas, like we just saw in the previous slides, here you don't have to write huge formulas. Here you just need to know the specific uh, thing that we'll be using, right? Let's jump to the second part. Okay. Um, a lot of text. Don't worry, I'll use my laser pointer. Just follow through my laser pointer. So to extract the three parts, we will use something called a split method, right? And what is defined in this bracket in split is the delimiter. If if you've worked with text to columns, I'm sure everyone has done text to columns, right? Text to columns mean you define a delimiter wherein there's a tab, there is a space, right? Or you can put a whatever. So if there's a full stop as well, you can put that in the custom box, and you can say that a full stop is my delimiter or a comma is my delimiter, right? So this function is exactly like your text to columns. It'll use the delimiter and break the text into three parts. But now what is happening here? So to use this, you just write product code dot split, right? But once you've split it, where do you store it, right? So you create a new variable. Now, what is that variable? It is called a list. So this parts that you see, again, custom name. Parts is something that I wrote, ChatGPT gave to me. You don't have to write parts. You can write anything. It is customizable. You could write list for all that matter, right? So when it is breaking that code into three different parts, it is creating a list and it is storing it. So whenever you generate an output, you need to store it somewhere, right? So in this case, we are storing it in the parts list that we've created, right? So it's a new variable created to store the results of the splitting the product code. Then product code is what we defined one step earlier, right? Which is TEC-PH-5816, because you saw when I print product code, it gives me TEC-PH-5816. Now I'll call the split method. I'll use the split on the product code. So the output will look something like this at the bottom. If you can see my laser, it'll give me a list, right? And in the split, what I have to do is I have to define the delimiter. Once again, I know that the delimiter is a dash. That's why I'm defining it as a dash. If you have multiple delimiters, you will have to look at the first instance, then the second instance. Just let's look at the code, how the code looks, right? So there are this is what the code looks like. The first line we've already understood this, right? The first line is something that we've already understood. Product code is equal to TC-PH-5816, where we use an assignment operator, an equal to sign, to put the value of the product code in the text product code, right? What is parts? It's a new variable that we're creating. You can name it anything. You can call it a list. You can call it a split product parts, whatever. It's customizable. It's a list. You're giving a name to a list. You're creating a new variable. What is product code? It's our original string, right? Because we've already defined that. Then what is split? It's a method to split a string into parts. It literally means what the name is, it'll help you split basis the delimiter that you define. And but you have to ensure that you define the delimiter within double quotes. Let's just look at how this will work in Jupyter Notebook, right? So I have my product code is equal to TC-PH-5816. Fairly simple. Now parts is something I've created a new list variable, and you just have to write product code dot split, and you define the delimiter. Now here, if I was to print parts, just look at the output. I'll just run the code. Yeah, here. So it is giving me a list TC-PH-5816. But now this list has a comma, right? I want to be able to extract it in as and when I require. For me, in my organization, maybe the first part of the product code means a division. The second part means an ingredient that is being used, and the third part is a serial code for it, right? So I want to be able to extract individual parts from the product code. So that is what we'll be doing now. Now that we've broken them down into a list, like we saw in the previous slide, right? We broke them down into a list. Now, what we'll be doing is we'll be understanding how we can extract from that list, right? So first thing that you'll have to do is now you create 3 more string variables, right? How will Python know what is the first part for you, what is the second part for you, what is the third part for you, right? So you will have to tell Python, okay, Python, part 1 is my first part 2 is my second part 3 is my third part. But if you just write part 1, part 2, part 3, Python is still not going to understand, right? So you write part 1 is equal to parts. Parts is what the list that we created. And in a square bracket, you're putting 0. What are you putting? You're putting 0. In Python, indexing starts at 0, not at 1. So when I put parts 0, it'll give me TC. This is not part of the code. Whenever I put a hash, anything after the hash is a comment that is not part of the code. It is not executed. I'll just put here for reference that as to what each of these lines of code will do. So if I write parts 0, it'll give me TC. If I write parts 1, it'll give me PH. If I write parts 2, it'll give me 5816. What if I want the last part? I can do a -1 as well. So it'll give me from the bottom. Now the 0, 1, and 2 in this argument are index values. Now indexing is a very important concept in Python. Indexing doesn't start at 1, it starts at 0. So whenever you want to extract the first part, you will not write 1, you will write 0. So parts 0 starts at the element at index 0. In Python, lists are 0 index, which means the first element has an index of 0. So parts 0 retrieves the first part of the product code, which is TEC, right? Parts 1 would extract the second part of the code, and similarly parts 2 would extract the third part of the code. Let's now look at what the code will look like. And there's someone in the meeting room. You have to specify in square brackets because that is how you have to do it when specifying the position or index of the item you want to extract, right? If you refer to the last line. So some things are sacrosanct, right? For example, in Excel, can you write a formula without writing equal to first? No, right? If I write sum A1 to A10, sum bracket open A1 to A10 bracket close, enter, nothing will happen. It's just a text for Excel. For Excel to understand if that there is a formula, you have to write an equal to first. Similarly, in Python, there are basic fundamental things that you have to remember. But the best part is if you don't, and if you make a mistake, it gives you what the error is, right? So we look at that as well. Now, you have to define the index. Whenever you want to extract something, specify the position. So index is nothing but I'm specifying the position. 0 means first position, 1 means second position, 2 means third position, right? Let's just look at what the code is like, right? We'll be building on the same code. So first if you can look, follow the laser pointer, everyone. First, we initialize the product code, which is we tell Python what my product code is and we give it a name, product code. Then we split it and we store it in a list called parts. We saw how that looks like as well. Now we access those parts by creating 3 new string variables, right? And a hash in Python, like I said, is for adding notes and comments. So see, we might not be not. I don't know if any one of you is a hardcore programmer or works in programming or coding or does this on a regular basis. But for those who are new, make it a habit. Add comments to your codes, right? Even if you're not working on Python in your organization, you're learning on your own. Add comments to your code. It's a good habit to have because when you share your code with someone, it is easy for the other person to understand, right? So it does not execute whatever you write after the hash. So this is one way of adding comments. There are, 5 6 other ways you can do it as well. Then now what we're defining is each part is assigned a position from the list in order to display them in the correct order. Then we are indexing, we are telling Python that I want 0 1 2, which are the positions from the extracted text. And my final output, when I print it, it'll look like this. So I'll have to print every time you want to see something, you have to print it for Python to display that result to you. Now I'll just go back a second. I just want to focus on something else as well. If you can see these commas over here, right? These commas are basically concatenating. So when I print part one, comma part one, when I put it in the double inverted quote, I am referring to, I'm adding, creating a string. I'm telling Python it's a string. It's not there in my code. But when I just write part one, it knows that since it is a defined variable, it'll give me TAC as an output. So when you write a comma kya karta hai? It adds spaces automatically. So when you concatenate in Excel, when we use concatenation in Excel, we have to add a between two ands and double inverted quotes, we have to add a space as well, right? Otherwise, Excel will not take a space. So in Python, it's a bit easier. You don't use a plus or an and to concatenate. You can use that as well, but you just use a comma so that it adds this leading space on its own, right? Let's just go back to our program here and let's just look how this will look like. Okay. So we initialize the product code. We created a list, right? We created a list and we split the product code basis the delimiter. In our case, the delimiter is a dash. Then we accessed each of the parts. How did we do that? We created 3 string variables, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And then we told Python that in part 1 is what? It is index of my parts 0. So यहाँ पे, if you look at what we had printed the list, अब इस list में what is 0? TC 0. What is PH? 58. What is PH? It is 1. And what is 5816? It is 2. But it is the third position because that in Python, indexing starts at 0. Right? Now, if I want to print this, I'll just write print. I'll have to add a double inverted comma. So I'll say my part 1, part 1. I'll just print the first part for now. I'll just run this. So it'll give me part 1 space DC. Now, although I didn't define a space over here anywhere, it still gave me that space. If I were to use a plus, okay, if I were to use a plus to concatenate and I run it, it'll not give me that space, right? So I'll have to use either you use a comma or you define that space, right? Because spaces are also, important. Similarly, like I printed part 1, we can do the same for part 2 and we can do the same for part 3 as well. I'll just copy this down. I'll just change this. I'll make it part 2 and I'll make this part 3. And if I run this, it'll give me the output. What is the desired result that we wanted, right? Any questions so far? We've understood the entire code. Fairly simple, right? Now that you look at it, see, before I started, this would have seemed difficult to me. Now that I've broken it down for you, it must have gotten a little easier to understand it, right? If you want me to unmute yourselves, I'll do that. Unmute yourselves. I'll just, yeah, you can unmute yourself if you have any questions right now, or I'll continue with this and I'll show you how you can, use ChatGPT to learn Python as well. See, the focus of today's session is not to teach you end-to-end programming, is just to get you started, give you direction, because I got a direction, I started, and similarly then, we can collaborate, work together, share our work on LinkedIn, all of that can be done. So if anyone has any questions, they can ask me or I'll continue. Perfect, no questions, that's fine. I will just do that. Sure. Now the fourth part is fairly simple. You've extracted whatever you wanted to, and now you use it for your analysis, right? So now you need to understand, okay, when you work in Excel, and why I'm saying Excel again and again, because you see something in Excel, you've been doing it for so long, right? You use VLOOKUP in Excel. You use basic arithmetic calculations like sum, average, countifs. We use conditional statements in Excel. Python also has conditional statements. It's just that the way they are written is different, but the concept is same. When I write an if my condition is met, I'll either have a true or a false. That is what I define in Excel in a simple if. I put my logic, I put a value of true and a value of false. Python would do the same thing because the logic is not going to change, right? And just a simple recap, we initialize the product code as in we define the product code in the first step, right? Then we split the product code using split, and in the brackets we define the delimiter in a string in a double inverted double quotes, and then we access those individual parts, right? In the second step we stored them in a list called parts, and in the third step we access them individually. We gave them different names. Part 1 was called, the TC was called part 1, PH was called part 2, and 5816 was called part 3, right? And then the fourth step is you utilize it, whatever analysis you want to do, you do that, right? Before this is a bit of theory, but it is important. Just want to show you. Before I do this, I'll go to ChatGPT and we'll try to do something in ChatGPT, right? So if where is my product code, I'll just copy my product code to ChatGPT. So you saw how it can create an Excel formula for you, right, from scratch. I'll just create a new chat and I'll just write use Python. Okay. I'll put my product code, extract parts. See, when you're using ChatGPT, it'll people say the more context you give, the more better the output. True. But when it comes to programming and all, no, you don't have to give a lot of context, right? I hardly had to write 6 words. I just wrote use Python. This is my product code. It doesn't even need to know what it is. But if you tell it what it is, it will name it that and extract parts. So there are multiple methods that you can use to split text. One is using regular expressions wherein you find patterns. I'll show you an example of this later. But I'd like to show you what we did. We used string splitting, right? But this is not the exact thing that we did, but that's fine. So I'll just explain this formula to you as well. The idea is you don't now need to read through a book to understand how to write a code. You know what problems you're doing every day, right? I'm 110% sure you're working on Excels every day and you have some problems that if you just think a little and you come to ChatGPT and you ask it to write the problem statement and use Python as an input, as a prompt, it will give you a wonderful output, right? And you can use that. So I'll just copy this code. Let's say we don't understand this code, right? But if at a first level, if you were to look at this, what is happening here? Text, we wrote product code, text, anything. It's storing tc-ph-5816 in a string variable, right? Which is text. Then it is splitting it. Then it is splitting it. Now here, it has skipped a step. So I didn't have to write again. So here it has used a conditional statement, right? We were just talking about conditional statements. So if length of parts, which is this, is equal to 3. Oh, also, by the way, in Python, so let's say you don't know why this double equal to is there. You just put it in ChatGPT, right? You just put a double equal to and say, what is this, right? By the way, it just means that parts is equal to 3. The length of the parts is equal to 3 because now when you split the parts, it'll have 3 things in its list, right? Also, when you want to go to the next line in when typing in ChatGPT, because when you press enter, it'll submit the prompt. So you press shift plus enter to go down, right? For now, I'll just submit. I'll just press enter. So in Python, the double equal signs is used as a comparison operator to check if two values are equal. It returns true and it returns false if they are not. So if x is equal to 5, so a single equal to is an assignment operator. If you refer to the step 1, wherein I assigned a value to the product code. When you use a double quote, it is checking if it is true or not, right? Fairly simple. So here it is not doing anything. It is just calculating the length. Now that we know that there are three parts, and we're splitting by delimiter, there'll be the length of my parts list will be 3. It is not calculating the length of each word, not TEC3, PH2, 58164. No, because if I go back to this step, when you print parts, when you print the split, what is happening is it is creating a list. How many? What is the length of this list? 3, because it has 3 distinct items in the list, right? And here again, it is checking if the length is 3. You define 3 names: part 1, part 2, part 3. You can call it anything you want, but use easy reference so that if tomorrow someone else is also using a code, they understand what are the string variables that you've defined. So it says part 1 is part 0, part 2 is part 1, part 3 is part 2. If this is true, then print, and if it's not, then print invalid format. We'll just copy this code, right? And we'll put it in Python and we'll run this. I'll add a, right? And I'll just run it. Right? It is able to give me the output. Now you take it a step further, right? You say, you copy this, you copy a line. Maybe you don't understand the line. You just explain this line to me. You can always do a course on Python. Fairly simple. But what I've learned and what I understand is when you write the code on your own, when you pick up examples that you're facing in your daily life and break it down like this, right? Now here the line print f part 1 is using a formatted string literal denoted by f before the string, right? F before the string. When an f is placed before a string enclosed in double quotes, it indicates that this is a formatted string. In a formatted string literal, you can embed expressions like variables, calculations inside curly brackets. Now, if you don't know what a formatted literal string is, copy, paste, and ask for it. Now, again, some of you might say, why not just Google? Because Google me, you have to go and search. Before ChatGPT, you would, if anyone of you works in programming or has done his engineering and has done even one project, you would have to go on Stack Overflow. You would have to go to maybe the Python, workspaces where people interact, online collaborative platforms, and you have to search through so much content to just find the right output, right? So a formatted string is a f string is a feature in Python that allows you to embed expressions directly into a string. So it is phenomenal, right? The level of detail that you can go to into understanding something fairly simple. Well, now by the way, Excel has functions which are dynamic arrays that has been launched in 2021. Just give me, I would just like to show you if I can just go back to my folder, right? Right. Let me duplicate this, create a copy, and I'll put this as the last. I'll name this dynamic arrays. Right? I'll clear these formulas equal to text. I'll have to clear this as well. Sorry. Array is a concept in programming. What basically happened in 2021 was Excel changed its calculation engine and introduced arrays. Excel is a programming language, right? If anyone tells you it's not, it is. It has become. It functions that way, right? So if I use a text split function, right? It asks me for the text, right? If I want it in separate columns, I'll just put a column delimiter. So in my case, the delimiter is this. I'll just press enter. It'll give me the output. look at the formula that we had earlier and look at the formulas that we have now. Isn't this fairly simple? Now these are new functions that have come, right? These have been introduced in 2021. So I think if you have Office 2021 and later, you might have these, but unless you don't have Office 365 subscription, you will not get an update to these, right? Then there is a function called text before, right? Now, if let me just zoom in because this is very interesting. Let me zoom. Oh, so by the way, in Excel now, if you select a part of the formula, it displays the output at the top, so you don't have to press enter and check the formula again and again. Now it is asking me for the text which I've defined. It is asking me for the delimiter. Now it is asking me for the instance number, as in I have two delimiters. Do I want text before my first delimiter or my second delimiter? Because if I do first, I'll get AZEB. If I do second, I'll get AZEB dash SEZ as my output. So if I just put instance number 2, look at my output. If I just put instance number 1, look at my output. Right? This is not a dynamic array formula. Text split is text before and text after is not. That's fine. What do I mean by dynamic arrays? If you look at the formula bar at the top, if you look at the formula bar carefully, when I'm selecting the first part, it is normal. It looks normal. When I select the second, middle, which we extracted, and the third, it is gray because you cannot edit this part, right? You cannot. If you edit it, the formula breaks. So the formula is essentially in the first cell only, right? You cannot delete it. So when you press delete, nothing will happen. But if you edit it, it'll get edited and it'll give you a spill error. This error was not there in Excel earlier. It has come recently, right? And you see this small dotted line that is being created around it. That is the array, right? Uh, I'll come back to you guys before we jump to the concepts that I want to show you. Let me go to chat and actually participants. And if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask them, or I'll go back to the presentation. No questions? Perfect. That's fine. We will hide the floating meeting controls and yeah. So now we did a very basic example, but now one will ask, okay, how much am I learning in this one example, right? Now let me show you what you're learning in only one example, wherein you had a product code with two delimiters and you split it into three different parts. I've got 6 slides. Each slide has 2 concepts. So you've got 12 concepts that you've learned just in a simple example. You understood how to use a string manipulation method in Python, right? I am sure even if you don't work on Python for the next 1 week, you're not going to forget that there is something in Python called string manipulation, because I have related it to text to columns. I have related it to a function in Excel called text split, text before, text after. Then you have your left, mid, and right. So it is difficult for you to understand when you relate with something that you already know, right? Then we understood what are list data types. We saw how it looks like. We split the product code and we stored it in a list. We called it parts in our case, right? We called it parts. Then, yeah, then we used variable assignment, wherein we said that product code should, what is product code equal to? It's equal to tc-ph dot 5-15816. What is part 1 equal to? It's equal to index 0 of the parts which we created. What is part 2? Index 1 of the parts. So variables are used to store and manipulate data, making them a core component of Python programming. Then we understood what is indexing and what is slicing, right? So to access specific elements in the list, indexing is used, which is your 0, 1, and 2. This introduces the concept of indexing and slicing. It's important to note that Python uses zero-based indexing, where the first element is at index 0. Python doesn't start in Python, index doesn't start at 1, it starts at 0. Then we understood how to print statements in Python. We use the print function. It is an inbuilt function. So Python has a lot of inbuilt functions. I have not focused on the libraries which you must have heard, NumPy, Pandas, Scikit-learn, PyTorch. We have not focused on that because just wanted to keep it simple for the first webinar. So we understood how to print. Then we understood string concatenation. Everyone knows concatenation in Excel. Use the concatenate or the concat formula if you have the latest version. What do? You use it to merge, right? You use it to combine, not merge. You use it to combine. Similarly, in Python, you can either use a plus, but then you have to define a space, or you use an F string that we just saw, right? Or you can use a comma as well. So there are multiple methods to do one thing in Python as well. So if you want to do concatenation, so for example, let me just a second. Let me exit the slideshow so that I can then go back to ChatGPT and I can ask in a new chat or just here itself. Methods of concatenation in Python, right? So you can use a plus operator, but you have to define the space. Then you can use a string.join iterable. Then you can use an F string. Then you can use a dot format function, right? Then you can use a percentage sign as well, but this is an older method. You can use list comprehension. There are multiple methods. If you ask for more, it'll give you more outputs. If you ask for it to explain, it'll give you more. But now tell me, which single source of truth, which course, which a book, obviously, but how many of you are going to read a book on Python? To be frank, no one is going to read a book on Python. But when you do a course as well, you get to learn, right? But the level of detail that you can do, the course is a good starting point, but how do you, this is the next step that you do, right? Coming back and going to the next slide, comments. We understood what commenting is just Python. So again, if I go back to ChatGPT, you ask how many ways you can comment. There are more than one ways, by the way, not just in hash. If you want to add comments on, if you want to start a comment on a line and end it on the second or third line, multiple lines of comments, you can do that as well. You don't need to write hash again and again. There's a method for that as well, right? So in this code, we used hash to define the steps. Now, you yourself tell me, if I had not written step 1, initialize the product code, step 2, split the product code, step 3, access, step 4, utilize, I would have had to explain it to you and it would have been a bit difficult for you to understand without the commenting, right? So use comments. If you're just starting out learning Python or will be starting after this, please use comments. It's a habit that you develop, right? Then we understood what variable data types are, variables and data types. We we saw what a string variable is, which was a product code and which was our parts. Let me go shift F5. Let me go full screen. Laser pointer. Sorry, my bad. Right? We understood what a string variable is, which I've highlighted in red. So it is used to represent strings or a sequence of characters, right? Then we understood what a list is. Again, it's a data type in Python. So it is used to store a collection of items which can be of different data types. So the parts that we created were the list. Similarly, the last part, data extraction and parsing, is something that they understood, and string splitting, right? String extraction, string manipulation, string splitting, all one and the same. So here, what we essentially did was we did extraction and parsing. Parsing is basically getting the value from something, right? It's a terminology in programming, right? And then we did string splitting, which is we used split method and we defined a delimiter, right? That is all I had from my side. I would just like to stop sharing my screen now. And you guys, if you have any questions, please go ahead. Yeah. If you have any questions, please go ahead, or I'll be sharing this PDF with you after the session as well. So you'll have access to that as well. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Yeah. Let me just check the chat. That's fine. Nothing in chat. Yeah. Perfect. No questions. That's absolutely fine. I hope you got an overview of what Python looks like, how you can work on it, how it is in principle, you saw it in theory, you saw it in action. We used a very common thing that we all do, which is text to column, splitting the text, using a left, right, mid, now using a text split or a text before or a text after, right? So that's very important for you to understand. That was the idea was to give you an overview, which you've got, hopefully. And we'll be doing more of these sessions, right? We'll be going more in depth, right? If you had not started learning Python and want to, this is the right step. I've shown you an approach. Try that. Do whatever's best for you, whatever works best for you, and I think that should work. So that's all from my side for today. If you have any questions, I'm here for a couple of more minutes, or then we can wind up the call. So yeah, thank you everyone. Yeah. So if you have any questions, or else we can wind up the call. Perfect. No questions. That's fine. We will then. I'll then be. Someone has put in something in chat. You're welcome. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining. Bye bye. Take care. Yeah, I'll be sharing the recording as well, Rishabh. I'll be uploading it on my YouTube, so you will have it. Yeah. Thank you, Rishabh.